Good evening. We're going to start at 6:30. We try to make a habit of starting on time, and actually tonight's even more important because the first pitch of the Red Sox-Yankee game happens at 8 o'clock, and I promise I'll be home by watching it, so will you. But thank you for coming tonight. It's really nice to see people in person. The last couple of years, it seems like we've been doing these evening programs from our kitchen tables or from our office and staring at computers, so it's nice to see folks in person here, so we appreciate you coming out tonight. My name is John Serafine. I'm the Director of Counseling here at the high school, and I'm joined tonight by all of our school counselors who are all going to speak to you in a tiny bit. Scott Allen is standing right here. Just so you know, let me just give you the Scott's alphabetical breakdown for his students. For ninth graders, Scott is responsible for students named Allen, last name's Allen through Ferguli, I hope I didn't mispronounce that. Fergueli, I did mispronounce it, I apologize. And 10th graders, Aguirre through Harding. And then Margaret Gordon sitting right here. Margaret has 9th graders Galambos through Rue, and 10th graders Hartman through Napieralski. And Miss Craig, who's right next to Margaret, 9th graders Salinas through Zimmerman, and Nur through Zesis. So Scott, Margaret, and Maggie will be speaking to you in a couple of moments. And let me just talk a little bit about the purpose of tonight's program. So we have a series of programs throughout the year. This one obviously is our 9th and 10th grade parent night. And what we're going to try to do tonight is kind of hit you with two different points of view. I'm one of the college counselors here, so I'm going to speak a little bit about early college planning and the importance of early college planning. And Scott, Margaret, and Maggie are school counselors, so they're with your sons throughout their duration of time here, and they're going to talk to you about just basically the 9th grade experience, the 10th grade experience, the culture here at Mcquaid, some expectations that we have of our 9th and 10th graders, and just trying to give you a flavor of what life is like here as a 9th and 10th grader, and talk a bit about what's down the road for them as they progress here. I thought I'd start by just kind of try to give you a snapshot of where we are right now, kind of where we've been and where we are right now. So believe it or not, it's shocking that the calendar turned over to October already. It felt like the first day of school was just a couple short days ago. But it's been a little bit of a challenge because what we're trying to do is kind of blend kids together. Some who've been here and were in person all last year, in person learning. Some were at schools, public schools that were hybrid learning, some kids that were fully remote learning, and they're all coming together at one time now. And we're trying to assess a lot of things, trying to assess, is there a learning loss from from last year? Are they properly placed in their classes? The socialization component is a little bit different because literally this is the first time we've all been together in somewhat of a sense of normalcy in about a year and a half. We were incredibly fortunate last year to be here in school every day, which was quite a blessing. But honestly, it felt different here last year. It felt very institutional. I mean, kids came, they took their 4 classes, they scattered throughout the building and all ate lunch at the same time and kept their distance, and then we kind of ushered them out the door. So there was kind of a void here last year, kind of a spirit. There wasn't a whole lot of spirit, wasn't a whole lot of soul here. It just felt, like I said, really institutional. So it's really nice to have some of that back. I think the kids are excited about the year. They're excited about sports and clubs and activities and some of the Mcquaid traditions that last year they really didn't get a chance to experience. And we're equally as excited about that as they are. Let me take a minute and just kind of explain how the counseling office is set up here at the high school. And it's a little bit different than most, and I think it's a model that works pretty well for us. We have 3 school counselors, Scott, Margaret, and Maggie. And like you said, they stay with the boys from now through the end of high school. And they do everything from personal counseling, academic intervention, career planning, anything basically that comes along the way, navigating their course here with teachers and, like I said, any academic struggles that they have. And then we also have 2 college counselors. So I'm one of the college counselors, and Jeff Griffa is the other counselor. And Jeff and I pick up juniors in the middle of junior year. So just towards the end of January, toward the junior year, we kind of swoop in and do some programming with the juniors, and then we are their college counselors for the duration of their time here at the high school. I think part of why that model works so well is that Scott, Margaret, and Maggie all are very well versed in college counseling also. They've done it before, they know what they're doing. So by the time kids get to Jeff and me, they've had a lot of exposure to these three folks who do a really nice job also. So that's the model that we have, and we're pleased with that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this over to Margaret. And Margaret's going to talk to you a little bit about the culture here at Mcquaid. And then Scott and Maggie are going to talk to you about the 9th grade experience and the 10th grade experience. And then I'll jump back on a little bit later to talk to you about early college planning.
Thank you. So welcome, everybody. A challenge to come up with how do I describe the culture at Mcquaid? I just told Mr. Serafine, the older I get, I need to read this phrase because I try to memorize it, but I want to make sure I get it right. So college prep, but also character education. We're prepping for the potential of college, but also creating great men. Challenging students academically, but to also be open to new experiences, to feel connected to Mcquaid. And as Mr. Serafine said, if there's any year that there's the importance of needing to feel connected to things, this would be it. Those are conversations we're having with our young men, and we have been having over the last couple of weeks, and will continue to do so for the coming weeks as we make our way through seeing our freshmen and our sophomores in individual appointments with each of us to get a pulse on where they're at. As Mr. Serafine mentioned, we have students coming in from different levels, some remote, some hybrid, some that came to school and did school last year, but maybe didn't get super involved. And so we're trying to just kind of get an idea of where they are at now, kind of meeting them at that level and challenging them to think about what the next step is if maybe they didn't take that next step last year, and maybe they can try doing that this year. To that end, one of the ways when we talk about culture at Mcquaid, involvement. So involvement in multiple different aspects. And when you talk about thinking about college prep a little bit early, we think about getting involved and staying involved. So colleges want to see that you are trying different things, but if you can find a couple of things that you really like and you're really good at, just stick with it and carry that through from freshman year, maybe through senior year. Paying attention to their likes and dislikes. A lot of times, we do ask them as early as freshman and sophomore year, have you thought about what it is that you might want to study in college, or have you thought about what career that you might want to do? And a lot of times they might give a general answer like, I want to do business, but I'm not sure what. Or they'll say, I really don't know. And we're basically telling them, so what have you done to try to help figure that out? Or have you done anything to kind of get yourself in front of different experiences so that you know what's out there? And that's the kind of thing to think about from freshman, through sophomore, junior year. The idea of trying different things that are in the community. So for example, yesterday I just got a new email from the Explorers organization in Rochester. So that's an organization that will allow students, they have different posts through law, through medicine, through paramedics, firemen, where you can actually go and either work with people at a specific agency, or you can go to an information night in the community. And one information night might turn into a 4-month, once a month kind of thing that you go and you kind of scope out and see if that's something that you like or not. And again, the way that I describe it, some students will say, well, I don't know if I want to do that or not. So try it. The best thing we can tell you to do is try it, because an experience that helps you learn that you don't want to do something can often be just as valuable as it teaching you that it is something that you want to pursue a little bit further. Job shadowing and internships. A lot of times what we'll do is, and we do talk about this specifically, we're bringing back this year career forums. So we have a phenomenal resource in our young alum, and they come back and we will feature different speakers that will come back and talk about what their path has been to their current career, or through maybe a career change and what they're doing now and how they started at Mcquaid, what they did through college, and what lent themselves to the situation that they're in today, and kind of the bumps along the road and what things would they want to pass along to our current students. So you'll see those advertised. Our students will hear those advertised. This is probably a good time to kind of let you know how to look for these things. So a lot of times, like for the last couple of weeks, I've been meeting with my freshmen. So I'll tell them, you know, because I've got a mix of students who are here from our 8th grade, mix of students that are coming in brand new, and I tell them, listen to the morning announcements. As of Monday, because when I get the daily, it actually comes up in my inbox, and many of you as parents get that as well. You're getting the written version of what our students are hearing in school. So on Monday, yesterday I counted, there were 6 clubs that had a club meeting starting yesterday. And so that idea of if any of the students tell you, well, there's nothing going on. There's almost always something going on. It's just a question of whether they choose to go there at Flex. So if you kind of want to see what they're hearing and ask them about it, that's a nice thing to do, to be able to follow up and say, hey, I noticed, tomorrow there's a Model UN meeting in Mrs. Soprano's room. Any chance you want to go and just kind of check it out? Sometimes it just takes a little prodding by you guys, a little encouraging by us to go try something. So that being said, last Tuesday I was so excited to see our activity fair come back. So the days leading up to it and even leading from it, we've got pieces of paper that have all the activities listed. But we basically had the field house full of tables with adult moderators and our student leaders behind the tables and in front of the tables talking about the different clubs. And what's been kind of cool is in the past week since that club fair happened, I'm starting to see when I pull up Schoology and I'm meeting with the freshmen, I can see the Schoology groups below it if they joined a club. So I learned from meeting with a student that we have a fishing club that just started this year. I'm like, what's this fish here? He goes, I joined fishing club. And I'm like, great to hear that we just started that. So I automatically thought of a few kids that are sophomores this year that last year wish we had a fishing club. So keep an eye out for that. Look at our clubs. And online we've got, because we didn't do the fair last year, we had some help putting an entire document together that shows all the clubs, a description of the clubs. So it's a really great resource to look at on the Mcquaid website. And talk to your sons about it. Encourage them to join something. You know them well. So they might tell us, well, there's nothing I want to join. And you look and you see 3 clubs that are right up their alley of interest or like where their strengths are. So for what we can't do, we ask your help to help us do that. Encourage them to join something. And then also, like for example, clubs have an inherent benefit as well too of doing a little bit of career exploration. So for example, when a student of mine says, I want to go into business, but I don't know what part of business. And so we kind of talk about the different areas. And I'll say, have you thought about joining the business club? And they didn't know it existed. So little things like that. The clubs can sometimes, like youth and government or speech and debate, if they want to go into something that involves speaking. Those are different clubs that not only they're just for fun, but they're actually clubs that can hone their interest a little bit and have them kind of learn a little bit more about what's involved in a particular career field. And also, just kind of expanding their social circle. So I know I've had a few conversations, and again, we have students at different levels of friends, like forming friendship groups. So that's one of the questions that I asked too, how are things this year? Are you coming in this year with the same circle of friends? With my new students, have you met new students? And sometimes that can be difficult to do. I find it has happened easier if they started a sport before school started or if they jump right into a club. So we've noticed clubs like robotics that are very, they're almost like a family. Like there's certain clubs like that you just go and you go once a month, and there's other clubs where they interact a lot and they have a lot of meetings, and we tend to see a lot of friendships and social circles expand from those clubs. So again, if there's anyone out there that's kind of thinking, my son's talked about he hasn't made, a bunch of friends yet. A club could be opening that door for that possibility. And so again, he can go to 3 different meetings, 3 different clubs, and they might actually be 3 different groups of people. And then he can decide which one to stick with based on who he's comfortable with. And that connectivity to Mcquaid as well too. Freshman year now, and I think first half of sophomore year too, it can be a little tough to feel like you're just going to classes and leaving the building. So that idea of our meetings being during flex, which is now part of the school day, it allows them to feel a little bit more of that connectedness to the school, which can only be a good thing. You know, we don't want them to just come here, learn math and science and social studies and English. We want them to come and feel connected to each other. We of course want them to feel connected to Mcquaid, and we want them to learn how to feel connected to the community by helping out with things like that too. So to that end, with community service, while it is a requirement for Mcquaid, there are a lot of times I have conversations with students that, like for example, if a student says, well, I want to go in the medical field, but how do I actively learn a little bit more about that? And so we'll talk pre-med club, and then I'll say, what are you doing for community service? So we've got an amazing array of hospitals right in the Rochester area that want to see Mcquaid students coming and doing service for them. So I'll say, you have to do service anyways. Do some in the field that you think you might be interested in. Join the Explorers Paramedics group. Try that for a couple of months. Before you know it, you now have 3 things on your activity list for college that is 2 and 3 and 4 years from now, and you've started it. And the other thing that, you know, I was just chatting with another student the other day about leadership. It can often be times maybe difficult or maybe a little scary to figure out what leadership roles are in the school as a freshman and a sophomore, but a club can lend itself to that, where sophomore year, junior year, senior year, they become the student leader of the club that all they did was join as a freshman. So it's kind of building up on that from each year, from one year to the next. So the next thing about the culture I like to kind of talk a little bit about is being open to growth, which should sound familiar. It starts to sound familiar to our students as part of our Grad at Grad. And they sat where you're sitting here right now and heard our Dean of Academics, Mr. Herschel, say to them, now that you are high schoolers, freshman, sophomore, even more importantly, to be an advocate for yourself. While we love to hear from parents, if there is a concern, if there is an issue, a question, a clarification you need from a teacher, our chain of communication at Mcquaid is you need to go to your teacher. And so again, they sat here and they heard that as, you know, kind of learning to have that piece of conversation. That is kind of a big piece of what the school counselors help with it too. They might be struggling in a class and they're not even sure what the first thing they should say to a teacher is, or they're intimidated to go after school and how do I ask for help? I'm usually really good at math and for the first time I'm struggling. So we'll role play that a lot. We'll guide them through what to say and how to say it, and we'll encourage them to go have that conversation. Most times, 9 times out of 10, they don't realize behind the scenes we might be doing a little finagling with an email or something to their teacher to just give them the heads up that that might be happening. In other words, be kind, he's coming your way. So, but keep that, you know, please, you can help us by encouraging them to do that. By the time they're a senior, you're going to be very glad they did that, because those are the conversations they're going to be having to have on their own with their college professors when they leave us. The other piece of the puzzle for open to growth, and this is sometimes difficult for our younger students to get used to, it's almost like they think that the minute they walk out the door, any connectivity to Mcquaid and responsibility, and I can't possibly get in trouble with Dr. Parks once I leave the building. And we are trying to teach them more and more that with social media and with their digital footprint, that is not the case. And now it even extends to colleges. So we're giving them the message, be very careful about what you're saying online, how you're saying it, and certainly who you're saying it to, because what you think is private is not necessarily. And if it comes into Dr. Parks, 100%, they are responsible for what they have said and done online. And so we're kind of having those conversations with the students to kind of remind them of that little piece when they think they're anonymous behind the screen, which they never are, but they still think they are. The last piece of the puzzle, and I think this is something that it's just inherent, it's very natural to something that we believe, you know, at Mcquaid, which is, hopefully you've heard it before, cura personalis, and it is caring for the whole person. So a lot comes across as academic minded, right? You know, how is my son doing in school? How are his classes? What is he going to take next year? And that is a big piece, of course, it's a big piece of what we do, obviously, keeping in mind what's ahead for them in 4 years. However, it's also important, a lot of times we're looking at the big picture. So for example, in the spring, when we're doing course selection, I will say from freshman to sophomore year, this is particularly important. Next year as a sophomore, it's the first opportunity that they can bump up to, for example, Advanced English and AP Global. So even a freshman in anything possible that they could take as a freshman right now, advanced, they could potentially double that level of difficulty next year. So what my student, like the phrase that I use is, you've been recommended for this, so you certainly could do this. The question is, should you? And I'm try very careful to make sure that's not a discouraging phrase. It's more like, let me hear about what else you're doing. And this is true for sophomores as well, going into junior year. Any possibility you're going to be getting a job? You are a 3-sport athlete? Okay, so what's that going to be like when you're having to manage 3 hours of homework? We will tell our students how many, any AP involves an hour outside of class, potentially for any hour you spend in class. So it's keeping in mind the big picture, and that's what we try to do as well too when we meet with our students, not just meeting them where they are, but what does their picture look like in their life for currently and what it might look like for next year as well too. So that being said, just as my closing statement is, help us essentially help you help your sons, because we might get a concern from a teacher who sees them every other day. We might hear from a coach. We certainly are listening when they're talking to us and we're asking questions and we're meeting with them. But you see them when they leave here, and you see sometimes the vulnerable side of them that they don't want to show while they're here. So we invite you to please let us know. Let us as their school counselor know if there's something we can do, if there's a concern you have. Are they stressed or are they anxious? Are they sad because something happened, or might they be depressed? Those are things that we want to hear about and try to walk through that with you and with your son if there are any concerns. So I would like to end on just inviting you to please do that, to please contact your son's school counselor. If not sure, Mr. Serafine can direct you to who the right person is, and that's what we want to help with. Because if we don't know about it from a different avenue, we'd certainly like to hear about it from you. That's a big part of us making sure that they are thriving at Mcquaid. The goal is not just to survive here. We want them to thrive and be happy and healthy in multiple ways, and that our job is to help them and help you help them do that. So thank you for listening. Appreciate that. All right, let's see if I can work this. Hopefully. All right, hello everyone. My name's Maggie Craig. I am the counselor for the end of the alphabet. Hopefully I have some of your sons in my caseload. Mrs. Gorton did a good job covering a bunch of what I will talk about, so I will keep it fairly brief, but I'm going to focus in on the freshman experience. So as you all know, if you are a parent of a freshman, it is a very big transitional year for your boys. The first year of high school, for many students, it's the first year that grades are going to be recorded on their transcript, which is the very, very important one-pager of all of their academic history throughout high school. Some of your sons might have some middle school courses on there if they're accelerated in math or science, but that is what we will send to colleges when they are a senior. At this time in their senior year, it shows everything they've taken and all of their grades. So everything counts kind of from this day forward. And it might not feel like it for them just yet. They might not feel like it's very important to get a really good grade in gym or in, their elective, but it all counts. It all is factored into their GPA, and it shows what type of student they are. So it is very important. It's in the best year to start. It's in their best interest to start this year off strong. And we know that's hard because it is a transitional year. So I'm going to talk about a few ways that you can help them to do that. So the most important thing is getting used to Schoology. Most of your boys are using it already very well. It's really important that they're checking throughout the day, multiple times a day. This is really important because that's where all of their class assignments are going to be posted. It should say all the due dates. There's a really great calendar in there that populates with important tests or quizzes or papers. It's also how we communicate with your students. So we'll send messages to them, hey, can you please come up to my office on Thursday at 2 p.m.
That's how we let them know that we would like to see them. They're never in trouble if we send a message like that. We just want to schedule an appointment. We don't use paper passes anymore. And their teachers might also reach out that way, especially if they're homesick or out for a period of time. It's good that teachers can be able to do that. And also your sons can reach out directly as well. That's an important two-way communication. So Schoology is really important. Completing homework daily is really important. You all know that. And your sons they know it, and most of them are really good about it, but some of them struggle. Really, if any student says, they come home and they say, oh, I don't have any homework tonight, I finished it all, you might want to push a little bit, because it is common that, 1 to 2 hours of homework a night in 9th grade is fairly common. Now, some kids are really great at getting it done during the day. They use their time at flex, they use their time in class, so they might not have as much. But even if there's not homework, a specific assignment, of course, there's always a little bit of studying or review to be done. In English class, they all do their Membean 2 times a week. It's like a vocabulary review session. It's really important that they do those. I know they find it kind of boring sometimes, but it's points that get added to their average. It's very helpful. We will harp on them to do it if you all are. I'm sure you all are as well. But tests and quizzes are really big, especially in high school. They are a significant portion of their grades, so making sure they're studying for those is important. Some of these guys, are really, really smart and haven't had to study super hard before, so it really is kind of figuring out what works for them. How do they study? Is it using Quizlet? Is it making their own study guide, highlighting notes? There are many different ways, and we can help them with that, of course, as well. The other thing is, if your sons struggle at all, if there's a class that's really hard for them, maybe it's math or science or anything, English, it doesn't matter. What Mrs. Gorton mentioned is really important, being a good self-advocate. So our teachers are here. We have flex until 2:50 every day. That is a really critical time. And yes, there are tons of clubs and different activities happening, but primarily it is an academic time. If your students are struggling, if they're failing a class, if they've got missing work, they missed a test, flex is the time for that. 2:05 to 2:50 or 2:10 every single day, except for Wednesdays. It's really valuable. Students can come, they can sit in the teacher's classroom and just do homework. They don't have to, talk to the teacher, but if they're confused about something, the teacher's right there. They can work in a smaller group. Not only does that help them academically, but it also shows the teacher that, hey, I'm here, I'm trying, I'm really working, I'm managing my time, and that goes a really long way as well. Also, using us as resources. So we've met all of our 9th graders just about, and we'll continue to do so, but they can be self-advocates with us as well. We have tons of tips on, ways that they might manage their time, or different organization strategies, or studying techniques, all sorts of things. We've seen a lot throughout the years, and if they ever have questions or need any help with that sort of thing, we are available for them anytime they want. And I think an important point to mention here is, yes, I'm focusing a lot on grades and how important they are starting this year strong, but there can be a little bit of a shock at the beginning too, especially kids coming from different middle schools. Sometimes these kids get bad grades. They didn't study as much as they should have. They forgot a homework assignment, whatever it is. And it's really important not to panic over a bad grade. Those are learning experiences. There are lots of grades here. One grade will not tank an entire grade for the year. Sometimes students, especially early on, can get a little bit nervous about that. So I would assure you to reassure them that that's okay. You don't want it to be a habit, but a little bit of calm around that sort of thing can be very helpful. Another important thing to mention, kind of along those lines, is the importance of taking care of themselves, balancing their lives, proactively caring for their mental health. That means, really trying to get enough sleep. I know it's really hard, especially with many kids playing sports or doing different things, but trying to be consistent every night, trying to limit the screen time that they have late at night. That's really, really valuable, helps them focus more during the day, and helps them, be more available for learning. It is a stressful school. There's a lot going on all the time, so I think it's important that they really are trying to find that balance, have time for friends and fun and family and all of those important things as well. Mrs. Squarton mentioned, but one important thing grades-wise with 9th grade is this is a year that they are establishing prerequisite grades. So we have a system like that each year with course selection. So if any student wants to take an advanced course or an AP, like AP World History, AP Computer Science Principles, or a bunch of different options, they usually have to get grades of around 90 or above in their classes this year in order to qualify to take those. The reason for that is we want to see that they're being successful in regular level classes before we push them up to something that's going to be harder. All of our courses are challenging, but those are going to move at a faster pace, have more homework, more independent work. So that is just important for them to keep in the back of their mind. A couple more points, but this is a different year, especially for some of your sons who have been here in middle school. We do have a new schedule. We've got a lunch rotation that you've probably heard is very confusing. We're all figuring it out. We are still wearing masks, so we do ask that your boys be sensitive to all the changes, follow the rules as best they can. Many of them are doing a really good job with that. So it's just, there are still things that we're figuring out as a school, and we all need to do to stay safe and healthy and here. So that's just something to reinforce with them as well from home. So we will meet individually with all of your sons a few times a year. They can always reach out and meet anytime they want, or Schoology message us. You can do the same. But we'll also push into their classrooms. In 9th grade, they take a technology and engineering seminar. We push into that class a few times a year to talk about different topics. In a few weeks, we're going to do one all about mental health. We're going to take a survey that's really important. We are going to, in the winter, talk about academic advising and college planning. So we use that, and we go into classes and teach some lessons throughout the year as well. They might mention that. We will, like I said, check in with them occasionally. They're never in trouble. We love to meet them and get to know them. One of the really great things about the way we set up the counseling department here is being able to stick with them from 9th through 12th grades. It's really great to see them grow and learn and see how this place changes them, and it's a wonderful thing. So our doors are open. Feel free to reach out anytime, and we encourage them to do the same. Freshman year is really exciting, and hopefully they've been off to a good start. It's already almost 5 weeks in, so it's moving right along. Mr. Allen's going to talk about the 10th grade experience, and then we'll keep it going.
Yes, the computer is flashing my picture at you for the last 10 or 15 minutes. I'm wondering if my boss is trying to send me a message. All right. Hold on, did it the wrong way. Okay, so one of the advantages to talking at the end is, in talking about the 10th grade experiences, many of the points that I will cover were previously covered by my peers, because 10th grade is really just that continuation of all those things that they've been doing in 9th grade, but maybe doing them at a higher level, if you will. As with, we're just wrapping up, as Maggie said, meeting with our freshmen. We also all have a small smattering of 8th graders this year, so that's where we are in the current proactive bringing kids in to meet with them. With the sophomores in particular, we'll start pulling them in for those proactive check-in meetings, but some of those students will be, we're doing a grade capture tomorrow. Tomorrow is the mid-mark of the first quarter. And so sometimes either teacher observations or through that grade capture, we'll identify students that are struggling a little bit, and they'll take priority coming in. Also, parents, you have the ability to kind of reach out to us and say, hey, for example, if I have the first third of the alphabet, I tend to start with the A's and work my way down to the G's, but it doesn't have to be that way. So if you'd like to see your son come in earlier, or if they would like to come in, some of them do, some will come in and check in with us earlier. We're always happy to accelerate where we would normally pull them in for our proactive check-in meetings, okay? For us, more than anything else, we talk about growth in the sophomore year. It doesn't matter whether your student was, I tell guys, look, I work with students with 99 averages and guys with, 71 averages. What we're really looking for a student to be able to do is wherever you ended up with 9th grade, can you improve from there, right? We'll encourage them to kind of do a discernment process, to think a little bit about, what worked for them last year, what didn't work for them last year, where can they maybe be open-minded or open to growth, as Margaret talked about. to maybe changing it up, doing things a little bit differently. A lot of times, like with those advanced and AP courses, excuse me, the students will have to kind of really do kind of a very different process because there is so much independent work that happens in those classes that they might not be used to, etc. So we're just really there sometimes to challenge a student, sometimes to coax them. It will vary as we kind of do our initial check-in meetings. Continuing with what Margaret talked about with getting involved, maybe a lot of times at the freshman level they're not quite ready in some cases. They need to concentrate on their grades or their sports or whatever it's going to be. But we'll also start to talk to them about, and one thing Margaret kind of mentioned, like perhaps being in that club where you are in it for a couple of years and end up maybe being a leader of that club. That's called depth of experience, which is something that colleges very much look for, whether that's in your community service efforts, whether that's in your activities that you do. That type of thing. You're being out there. We kind of help them understand how colleges will start to look at their resume, if you will. Sometimes teach them what a resume is, and how they look at everything from your transcript, etc. We're basically starting to make it be much more tangible for them for what things are going to look like as they advance into the junior year, where that's where it really counts very heavily, and we're just helping them see that part of the process. As with pushing into the 9th grade classes, we also push into the 10th grade health class. We'll do a couple of different lessons. We'll do an initial one on digital safety and also combating hate speech. And then we'll do that usually in the first week of November or in that time frame. We haven't actually picked the dates yet. Then we'll also be pushing in the spring to start a vocational unit with them to help them start to think about, what do you want to do? And maybe start to pick up a little bit more on what Margaret mentioned, developing their interests and how those interests might parlay into particular career fields, how to do the research. Research is one of my absolute favorite words at Mcquaid because it heavily comes into play with college and careers. And we'll spend a lot of time, that class, we'll spend time with them there, and then the kids can come in and meet with us individually if they want to, on top of that as well. But essentially, jump-starting that thought process a little bit further than probably they were used to thinking about it as freshmen. Finally, very similar, again, with what Maggie was talking about, we do meet one-on-one with each boy for their course selections, and we'll talk with them much more at length, again, bring it all back into the college window, if you will, and helping them understand, particularly the AP courses pick up heavily in the junior year. There's only just a couple of ones that Maggie mentioned at the sophomore level. And so making sure up front that they know what they need to do for grades to qualify those and what that process is going to be as well. And same deal with that, very much what Margaret said. Parents, if you've got questions, if you've got input, feel free to jump in and talk to us. We will publicize out front that we are meeting with your boys for those meetings. And you can always sometimes the boys are more open to hearing your thoughts through us. Is that diplomatic enough? I'm sure you've all seen that a little bit, and that sometimes we can help with that part of this process. So finally, wrapping it up, just what are we here for? We support academic, personal growth, college growth, career growth, pretty much anything we can help with. So don't, like Margaret said, don't be hesitant to reach out for us as needed. Turning it back to John.
Thanks, Scott. I apologize for the light show behind you. That wasn't our design. We'll try that again in a minute. I just want to wrap up, talk a little bit about early college planning. And I know it's early on, 9th and 10th grade, but quite frankly, it's never really too early to at least start gaining a knowledge about the college planning process and exposing your sons to the process. So if you don't mind, in this booklet, this little lavender booklet, if you open up to like the 3rd page in where it says early college planning, I'm certainly not going to read this in its entirety to you, but I just want to touch on a couple of random thoughts that I threw down here. So I just thought these were some tips for 9th and 10th grade students and parents to assist in early college planning. The first thing I wrote here is that, make academics a priority. A short month ago, we had all the 9th graders in here for their orientation, and the point I was trying to make to them was that this counts. 9th grade counts, and 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they count too, but those grades don't show up on the kid's high school transcript. So 9th grade counts, and so does 10th grade, by the way. And a lot of kids, kind of bury themselves academically in their first 2 years, as they're trying to figure their way out. And I'd be a rich man if I had, $1 for every kid who, all of a sudden he's a senior and said, geez, I wish I'd put more time into my grades in, 9th and 10th grade. So they're important. These 2 years are half of their high school career, so obviously it's very important. The second thing I wrote down here is choose your courses wisely. Margaret, Maggie, and Scott just talked about that a little bit. One of the things that you hear all the time, and you'll continue to hear as it gets closer to college application season, is the importance of academic rigor. Colleges not only look at your grade point average, but they look at the rigor of your academic curriculum. What courses did you take at your high school that, to challenge yourself? And I think the most important line in that paragraph is where it says students need to find an appropriately challenging course load. And that's where we kind of partner with you folks and with your sons to try to find something that's appropriately challenging. So, kids are ambitious and, they want to do well. And oftentimes kids here, they hear, hey, if I take a rigorous course load, that's going to be my ticket to a good college. And while that's, there's certainly a grain of truth to that, or a lot of grains of truth to that, there needs to be a balance. Running out and taking 6 AP classes just because you think that's the right thing to do can also backfire. So I think the key word there is try to find a really appropriately challenging course load, and that's something that we will help the kids with. The third thing has also been talked about already is just get involved in extracurricular activities. I wrote down here, the best predictor of what a student's going to be like in college is what he was like in high school. That's what college folks have to go by. And colleges are basically, they're little communities, or some they're big communities, but essentially they're inviting kids to their community for 4 years. And they want kids who are going to enrich their community. So if a kid who has been pretty passive and disengaged in high school, they pretty much think, well, that's probably how this young man's going to be when he shows up here on our college campus, and that's really not what we're looking for. And again, they don't have to have a 4-page activity resume. And quite honestly, sometimes that's kind of counterproductive. It's find a couple things that you're really passionate about and committed to. And that goes a long way. Plus, I think it just helps to have a better experience here at Mcquaid. Margaret mentioned, we don't want kids to just show up here, take their classes, and then get out of here as fast as they possibly can. We want them to be involved. The fourth thing I wrote down is just a kind of a personal pet peeve of mine. I just don't think kids read enough anymore. Kids are crazy busy. I think kids need unions more than adults do, and their time is crazy busy between activities and sports. And I think as a result, I don't think kids read enough. And honestly, reading just opens up so many opportunities for them. And in a real practical thing, it also helps prepare them for standardized tests, which I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes. This is just kind of a self-serving plug. Get to know us. We work closely with your kids. These guys all have 150 or 100. Don't hold me to the number, but they have a large number of students that they're dealing with every day. So reach out to us, get to know us, and get to know your high school counselor and get to know your college counselor. And we want to have a good relationship with you. I wrote down here, visit college campuses. And I think early exposure to college campuses is a really good thing. Having kids see and step foot on college campuses is important. And we live in a community that's, it's kind of neat because you can go, an hour in about 6 different directions and see a wide variety of schools. Right? You can go 10 minutes from here and see a world-class, private research institution at the U of R. You can go down 390 and see a small, fairly selective SUNY school. You can go down East Avenue and see Nazareth and St. John Fisher. You can, there's no shortage of schools. You go up at Henrietta and see RIT. All totally different experiences. But I think having kids, exposed to college campuses early is a really good thing for them. Develop study skills. Getting off to a good start is important. And developing study skills early on in your high school years is essential because the workload only gets more difficult. The time that's expected for your studies is going to get greater. And I think kids who establish good routines early tend to obviously be more successful as their years go on here. I wrote down here, create a 4-year plan. I think it's good just to lay out, either on paper or in your head with your son, what these 4 years might look like. It might be academically, what courses might he take. It might be, what activities, clubs, sports, musical activities, whatever that they might avail themselves to. But I don't think it's a bad idea to take a broad look at these 4 years here at Mcquaid, because they go fast. They go incredibly fast. Number 9 is more for parents. I just wrote down, learn how to pay for college. Easier said than done, right? But I think all of a sudden it creeps up on you, and if it's your first time through the experience, it's a little bit daunting. And I think the last thing you want to have happen to you is you don't want to be surprised by the financial aid system or how it works or how it doesn't work, and all of a sudden, all the work that your son's done to get to that point is kind of, blown out of the water because the finances just didn't work. Obviously, I think just having a cursory understanding of how financial aid works, especially early on in a high school career, is a pretty wise thing to do. The 10th thing I wrote on here, I said, use high school to learn about yourself. What a wonderful opportunity, especially for 9th graders. You come in here, you have a blank slate of a transcript, you have a world of opportunities, clubs galore. They're all listed in the back of this booklet. So again, everyone around here is encouraging kids to stay actively involved. 11 and 12 in here, I think we've talked about a little bit. I think it's a fine balance. We do want your sons to grow independently. We want them to speak for themselves. We want them to advocate for themselves. We want them to troubleshoot by themselves. Sometimes that's not possible, and sometimes obviously you need to support them and be there with them. And we certainly hope you would do that and reach out to us when necessary. Number 13 here, I said, educate yourself on the landscape of college admissions. And last year, the landscape of college admissions got spun on its ear. COVID just changed a whole lot of things in the college admissions world, from the level of selectivity to an explosion in the number of college applications to incredibly large wait lists to a little bit of a buyer's market in terms of financial aid, where colleges went through this time period where it was very, very difficult for them to predict their enrollment. Colleges do a masterful job every year trying to, if they want a class of 500 kids, 500 freshmen, they have all kinds of metrics and historical data to say, okay, we have to accept, 2,500 kids perhaps to get a class of 500 kids. Well, COVID comes along and just kind of blew that whole thing up. So I think last year was very, very hard, and I think it's going to be the same this year. It was very hard for colleges to predict enrollment. And as a result, you saw kids applying to more and more colleges, and more kids were put on the wait list. Testing was optional, so all the colleges were forced to go test optional, and no one really knew exactly what effect that would have. The effect that it had was that I think more and more kids applied to schools that were maybe a little bit higher up on the food chain than they typically would apply to, simply because they realized, well, I don't have to worry about an SAT score, so I can apply. But I think just reading and just being at least cognizant of the trends in college admissions are helpful. Two last things. It says start to lay the foundation to help prepare for standardized testing, which leads me to a couple of things. The PSAT will be given here next Wednesday for 11th graders only. Now, 10th graders, is it beneficial for 10th graders to be exposed to standardized testing? Sometimes I think it is, sometimes I think it isn't. The PSAT is a practice test. It's a preliminary SAT. It's essentially a practice test for the SAT. When students take it in 10th grade, they're basically taking a practice test for a practice test. And I do think it has some merit, but we're not giving it to kids on that day formally. But what we are doing is we're giving the actual test to the 10th grade English teachers, and the 10th grade English teachers will in turn give that to your students. And there'll be an answer key on that, and we would encourage you to have kids that take that test, either in a timed environment at home or in sections or whatever. We also have a full-blown practice test that we give to all the 11th graders, and so we basically have two tests that we can give your sons to practice on. So they'll take their PSAT in October of 11th grade. Then they will most likely take their SATs in the spring of junior year. The SAT is given multiple times throughout a year. In the spring of junior year, it's always given March, May, and June. And then it's given again in August prior to senior year, and then again in the fall, usually October. So most of our students will take the SAT at least twice, sometimes a third time. So kids who are taking it twice will take it once in the spring of junior year, and then they'll take it again in the fall of their senior year. Kids who take it 3 times tend to take it like March of junior year, then they'll take it May or June of junior year, and then again they'll take it early in their senior year. And it behooves kids to take it 2 or 3 times simply because colleges do this thing called super scoring, where they'll take the kid's highest math score and they'll hook it up with their highest reading and writing score, even if they're from different test dates. All right, so that's why we encourage kids to take the test, 2 or 3 times. I'm not a big fan of, the more the merrier, and there are better ways to spend your Saturdays than take this thing 6 or 7 times. But again, like I said, they're going to hear us say, taking it twice, maybe a third time is a pretty good idea. ACTs, if I was standing here 10, 15 years ago in front of you, I would have said, an East Coast ACT really is an afterthought. It's like a little sister to the SAT, not a big deal. Well, now more kids in this country take the ACTs than the SATs. And just about every college will take either or. All right, so they're slightly different tests. The ACT has a science component to it that the SAT doesn't. And there's some other subtle differences in terms of timing. But again, some kids will take both. My advice to both kids is, make yourself familiar with both. I think it's a good idea at least to take each of them once to see where which one you like better. And then if you want to kind of pair off and take, or peel off and maybe just take one or the other, that's fine. All right. The last thing around here is a strike a balance. I think we're all guilty a little bit of being, pushing academics on our kids and, build your activity resume and do this and volunteer and don't forget this. And, but it's also really important for these kids to have a balance in their lives. And it's okay to be 14 and 15 years old and do the things that 14 and 15-year-olds do. And like I said, I just never, I don't think there's ever been a time when kids have been more, more booked. They're just constantly on the go, and we have a lot of expectations from them. And, by the time they get home from here, if they're in a club or a sport or they're working, we're saying, don't forget, you got to get 2-3 hours of homework done. And, by the way, you got to volunteer 12 hours this weekend. It's a lot. All right, so I ask you just to, be mindful of that and, really kind of join forces with us to try to help them strike a balance. Okay. Aldrin Wilson, one of our students last year, graduated in class of 2021. He's off at Harding College down in Arkansas right now. But he was one of the graduation speakers last year and did a beautiful job, we think, summing up kind of the Mcquaid experience and what brotherhood is all about.
A word often heard in Mcquaid is brotherhood. So when we speak about an orientation to new students, graduation, and mass, any other time that we come together, we always talk about brotherhood. I know when I first came here in 7th grade and heard from my homeroom teacher that I would have brothers when I graduate, I laughed. Thought she was crazy. But now here I am, the senior, with 153 brothers that I'll have for the rest of my life. But the question is, how do we get here? See, I first experienced the call to brotherhood in 7th grade when a classmate of mine lost his father. The following week, we came together and we prayed. And that's when I started realizing there's something special about Mcquaid. The next year, I experienced another great call to brotherhood when we lost a classmate. It was hard on us. We were young, and we didn't know what it would be like to lose a classmate. But once again, we came together and we prayed. You see, it wasn't so much the prayer that brought us together, but the fact that we're willing to pray together. There's this vulnerability in prayer that you have. When you open yourself up, your weaknesses, your flaws, your indecencies. And when you share that with one another, there's something special about it. Because you see, Mcquaid doesn't make us brothers. It didn't bring us together and force us to be brothers, but instead prepared us to be a brother. It wasn't just in the hard times that we came together and prayed. At our awards assemblies, when a team won a state championship or a sectional championship, in the good times, we came together and we prayed. This prayer was a way to say, I'm here for you. I support you. I want you to do well. I want you to be well. This prayer prepared us to be a brother. And when you have young men together who are all willing and able to be brothers for one another, that is where you have brotherhood. In these times of vulnerability is where we found brotherhood. That is special about Mcquaid. That is what's special about the young men behind me. They're willing to be brothers, and they are my brothers. So Mcquaid, thank you. Thank you for making me a brother. And to my brothers, thank you. Thank you for praying with me. God bless.
So I think Aldrin did in 4 minutes, so we tried to do in an hour and did it a little bit better than we did. So he did a beautiful job, and we're really proud of the young man that he is and will continue to be. So thank you for coming out. It's 7:28. If you drive fast, you too can get to see the first pitch of the Red Sox-Yankees game. In this booklet, in the front page, there is all our contact information. Please don't hesitate to call us, email us, come see us if we can help in any way. All right, and thank you again for coming out, and drive safely.